Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at the current edition of the North Coast Journal. My name is Matt Knight, and I am joined today by North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and the arts and features editor, Jennifer Famika Cahill. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi, Matt. How you doing?
Dave Frank is away again this week, and I don't know about you, but I'm super hopeful that he's going to be back next week. Because I don't want to stick you with me one more time, but
poor Matt left alone with us.
Well, it's not that. It's what I'm inflicting upon the audience. Thad, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's on the cover of the North Coast Journal this week?
Yeah, so this week we have a really good story about a really kind of dire situation on the Klamath River, or actually throughout the entire Klamath watershed. So I think, as most of our viewers probably know, we are the state of California, basically in its entirety, is in drought conditions right now. The conditions are really acute in the Klamath, where there is never enough water to go around, even in a good year. Basically what we have is a bunch of divergent groups with divergent interests fighting over probably the amount of water that would be insufficient for any one of them. And so it's a pretty dire situation where everybody is going to lose and everything is going to lose, and it's looking bleak, honestly.
Now, did I understand that there's been a questionable release of water by one of the agencies involved?
Yeah, so an irrigators association up in the Upper Klamath, so in Oregon, around Klamath Lake, basically was told by the federal government not to draw any water out of Klamath Lake, the reservoir up there, and they did so anyway. They're contending that they have a state release. So under state law, they're allowed to release a certain amount of water, and this wasn't a violation of federal law. But the Department of Interior feels otherwise. That's a contentious situation, and it certainly engendered a lot of hard feelings downriver, both with the Klamath Basin tribes and then also the Yurok and Kuruk tribes further downriver. But it's also a pretty minimal amount of water in the grand scheme of things. And so it's a little bit more symbolic than anything else. But the problem is, and this kind of gives a hint at just the kind of the gravity of the situation, is the irrigators up there are generally get about 400,000 acre feet of water a year. And that's, probably what they feel is not enough to irrigate their crops and grazing lands up there. And this year they have been allocated 33,000 acre feet of water. Wow. Which, some people are saying, well, why even plant? Why even, use that much water? Why not let it all go downriver? And then, one thing that's, really sad and kind of, but also interesting about the situation is that the situation in Klamath Lake is so dire, and there's so many demands on the water there, that the Kuruk and Yurok tribes and the Klamath tribes, which have really been in lockstep with the dam removal deals and have really supported each other kind of throughout this whole process, are now in kind of an adversarial point. And I think they're all, being very understanding about it, and I don't think there's any hostilities there. But the Klamath tribes have now sued the federal government to prevent further releases out of the Klamath Lake, in an effort to protect two endangered suckerfish up there, which the tribes, and it's a coalition of a handful of tribes, but they're very much sacred in their tribal cultures, the way salmon are to the Yurok and Kuruk tribes. And but this lawsuit, and if it's successful and prevents any further releases, it can't help but harm downriver interests. So the Kuruk tribes and the Kuruk tribe and the Yurok tribe, and salmon populations. And so It's a fraught situation, and the federal government, the Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, and I know Jared Huffman, our North Coast rep, has been very involved in this, have put together kind of a task force to look at the situation and try to figure out if there's anything at all they can do. And so, one potential solution that has been implemented now down on the Sacramento River is they're actually worrying that hatchery fish aren't going to be able to get out to the ocean because the situation of the Sacramento River is so dire and water conditions are so poor there. They're actually trucking thousands and thousands of hatchery fish down to basically down to the ocean and releasing them so they can swim out to the ocean and survive. And so some have asked, is that possible on the Klamath, where the Department of Fish and Wildlife has a hatchery and releases hatchery fish into the river? And it is possible, but a potential problem there is that if salmon basically return to their spawning grounds. And so the hatchery fish on the Klamath now, when they're released every year, 2 or 3 years later, when they return as a part of their life cycle to lay eggs and whatnot, they return to where they were released. So they return to the hatchery. If they're trucked down to the mouth of the river, then they're not going to really know where to return to. And the risk on the Klamath is that we still have native species of salmon that have kind of unaltered genetics and haven't intermixed with hatchery fish. And the worry then is if those hatchery fish are released at the mouth, that they'll come back and intermix with, the kind of the more genetically pure salmon or natural salmon. So there's a lot of different groups trying to figure out kind of any potential solutions to try to save as many fish as possible. The concern with releasing the hatchery fish as they normally do all at once is because river conditions are so low and temperatures are so warm, is that any potential crowding of fish really escalates the chances of disease spread. And so they're worried that if they release the hatchery fish as they normally would, that it'll cause kind of a massive juvenile infection and die off of juvenile salmon.
Wow, what a mess.
It really is. And, absent kind of biblical rains coming in the next month, it just really seems like there's very little anybody can do. And it's other than kind of hope for the best and hope we don't see a salmon kill kind of like we did in 2002 when water conditions were so poor.
Boy. All right. Well, I wish I could say we were going to turn to some good news, but unfortunately, it's more COVID in the news. And you had a piece in this current edition about COVID situation here on the North Coast.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not too much good news there either, other than that vaccines are available. And so if folks have not been vaccinated, go to myturn.ca.gov and make an appointment and get in to get a shot. But yeah, public health updated kind of the epidemiological picture this week. So just kind of what disease spread on the North Coast is looking like. And it just really has continued to escalate. And so we went from 130 cases 2 weeks ago to 137 cases last week, and are on track for about that again this week. We've had a severe uptick in hospitalizations. I think as of Tuesday, Public Health reported that they had seen 17 hospitalizations over the course of the last week, which is just a higher rate of hospitalization and kind of acute illness than we've seen at any point in this pandemic. So even higher than after the holiday surge and stuff like that. And officials are attributing this to the new variant that has been discovered up here and is believed to now really be widely circulating up here, which is the B117 variant of COVID, also known as the UK variant, and is believed to be up to 50% more contagious and also lead to more acute and severe illness.
Lovely. So
yeah.
What do you think the prospects of us going, or did they have a feeling for what the prospects might be for us going back into the red tier?
Yeah, so our numbers, when the state updated its tier structure on Tuesday, our numbers for the previous week would have absolutely qualified us for the red tier. The state, however, requires that a county be in those escalated numbers for 2 consecutive weeks before it changes. It honestly seems unlikely that our numbers will reduce back to the orange tier strata for the next week. But it really remains an open question of what the state's going to do. The state is really, from all indications, trying to move away from implementing further restrictions, and is really trying to move toward its June goal of having no restrictions statewide. And so this is kind of a test for the state, honestly. Dr. Hoffman, our public health officer, on Tuesday told the Board of Supervisors that, Humboldt County has not just gone from having some of the best numbers in the state to now some of the worst, but is really the only one of only a few counties in the state that is trending so severely in the wrong direction. And so what the state chooses to do here is kind of an open question. And, honestly, Dr. Hoffman has made some comments over the last week where he seems doubtful that further restrictions would be of much help at this point, that there's so much movement toward reopening society and kind of getting things back to normal that, he seemed to be doubtful that people would abide by new restrictions even if they were imposed. And I think the last thing that public health wants to do is institute a mandate or a regulation that is going to be disregarded by kind of the majority of people. It doesn't do much.
Now, did they talk about any sort of plans around the vaccine reluctance that we've been seeing and the appointments that have gone wanting? Did they have an idea how they would move on that?
Yeah, so public health is I guess taking a kind of multi-pronged approach to that. The first thing they're doing is relying more on mobile clinics. So instead of kind of the mass large community center type of events that go all day and try to vaccinate 1,000+ people, they're focusing more on deploying their mobile medical unit to smaller communities and setting up at kind of like volunteer fire departments or smaller community centers, places where people are going to feel comfortable and trying to meet people where they are in that way. So tomorrow there's a small clinic in Rio Dell, which to date has had one of the lowest vaccine uptake rates in Humboldt County. And I think we're going to see more small events like that. And then at the same time, they're really trying to devise a kind of a messaging strategy. At addressing the Board of Supervisors on Tuesday, Dr. Hoffman just kept coming back to the idea that vaccines are the ticket out of this. That we know that other mitigation measures help as far as masking and distancing and all those things. But if we're talking about really putting this chapter behind us, then vaccines are the only ticket. So at the same point when he was talking about kind of seeing more acute illness with this new variant locally, he made a point of saying, the population that we are not seeing affected by this more virulent strain are those folks who are vaccinated. They're not getting acutely ill. And then I think that public health has also been reaching out to kind of quote unquote community leaders, prominent figures locally, whether they be police chiefs or fire chiefs or elected officials, and having them do short film segments and also just kind of a photo and a paragraph of text or something for social media talking about why they chose to get vaccinated. And I think we're going to see more and more of that in the coming weeks.
Yeah. All right. Well, not a lot of good news in there. But all we can do is move forward, right? We can just move through time, and hopefully it'll catch up.
Yeah. And also plead with people to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
Yep. And, I think that's a really important point, and I'll kind of echo some of the things that Hoffman said on Tuesday. But, of those 17 hospitalizations last week, we saw, half of them were younger than 60. We saw our first hospitalization of somebody younger than 19. And so there's a lot of kind of bleak data in there, but the one, silver lining is that none of those folks were vaccinated. And so there is not just, kind of following national and global trends. There's a growing body of evidence in Humboldt County that we're not seeing, really acute reactions to the vaccination itself. We're not seeing really adverse allergic reactions or anything like that. And we're seeing, a growing body of evidence that vaccinated folk aren't getting sick here. And that's a good thing. That's a ray of hope.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Well, let's pivot to Jen and talk about Frybread.
Yeah, I have good news.
Much better. Much better.
Ready for it.
What's hilarious is earlier when we were planning this discussion, I will share with our viewers that Matt asked, how long can Jen talk about Frybread? And Thad was like, because for the past few days, honestly, since last week, I've been obsessing about Frybread because a stand has opened up, Frybread Love. And Frybread is love. I will explain why. But a local woman named Kayla Molson and her mother and her sister and her cousin, she's got family pulling in to help at the stand and everything. They are making Frybread, which normally you can't get outside of a private family event or, a tribal event. You have to wait for Frybread to kind of come to you, right? So as a non-tribal member, personally, I just wait all year. And then finally at a street fair, at the intertribal gathering, Frybread shows up. But this Frybread is a little bit different. And part of the reason why is because Kayla's mother, Lisa Sundberg, who I watched make Frybread on, I went up there on Monday to the Sherry Heights Casino where they've set up their stall just outside on the street. That's right. I pulled up to the casino and didn't even go inside. I just went out and got Frybread and ate it in the parking lot like an animal.
Outside with the smokers. Eh?
Yeah, that's right. So, I have to say that the texture and the flavor it's the best Frybread I've ever had in my life. It's so wonderful.
So why don't you explain what Frybread is?
So out of a very few, only 5 ingredients, it's like flour, salt, baking powder, a little bit of sugar, and water. Those things get mixed together in a secret way that this family will not reveal to me, and kneaded into a dough that rises for a couple of hours, and then you kind of handle it, turning it into a kind of like a little tiny pizza, and then dip it gently, lovingly even, into boiling oil where it kind of bounces like an adorable little dinghy until it's golden brown and it's flipped. And then when it comes out, you can either top it with something sweet, jam, Nutella in this case. It was so delightfully like all my, feelings feeding. It's probably good I can't have Frybread on the regular at home because I would just be sitting there with a jar of Nutella. And also the Indian taco. Most people, I think their first introduction to Frybread is via Indian taco, which is with a bean chili, lettuce, tomato, sour cream on top. This one is cut up into little pieces, little bite-sized pieces of Frybread, because they see me not only emotionally, but they literally might have seen me at the intertribal gathering trying to eat this taco like this and just covered in food. So a much easier way to eat it. But it's so delightfully crisp on the outside, a little crisper than a donut would be, and a little bit chewier on the interior, but very chewy and fluffy, tender and fluffy inside. And part of the reason is because they're using fancy flour. They're using freshly milled, stone milled organic flour that they have. They're in cahoots with Beck's Bakery, with Rhonda over at Beck's Bakery, to get fancy organic stone milled flour, which I'm told is easier on the body and also just makes that wonderful texture. The technique, the ingredients, all those things come together to make just this fantastic Frybread. Lisa Sundberg, Kayla's mother, explained to me how when she used to work, or she still does work in the gaming industry, she traveled all over the states to a million different Indian casinos, and everyone she went to, she tried the Frybread, talked to people, got techniques, got what they do. Some of them do yeast. The Ojibwe, actually, Kayla is part Ojibwe also. In the Midwest, serve it with soup, with chicken wild rice soup and other things. Right now, the menu is really limited for Frybread Love, but they are looking at all kinds of possibilities of what to add to it. And among them, maybe pork sliders are in our future. I have now a very, like an obsessed serial killer board of red string and pictures of things that I want to eat on Frybread. Like, can I eat crab on Frybread? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. So, but I think what's really fantastic about it is that, watching Lisa form the Frybread was a lot like when you watch someone who makes dumplings, who's made, those 10 million dumplings in their lifetime, where they're just kind of working quickly and confidently, and it's perfect. And then you try it, and it's the saddest, misshapen thing you've ever seen, this Franken thing. But the mastery of cooking in that way, mastery is wonderful to watch. And also, I went into this wondering about, like, well, Frybread is like a weird universal across Native people in America. When you think about people who are living in the Northeast versus people who are living in the Southwest and the Pacific North Coast, how is everybody making Frybread? And the answer is commodities, starting with the displacement of Navajo people to New Mexico on the Long Walk in 1864. The U.S. government figured out, like, oh, we're actually ripping them not only from their homes and their land, but from all of their food sources, all of their resources, and all of their traditional foodways. We better send them some food so they don't starve. Commodities food, have the reputation of being some of the unhealthiest food. Canned food, shelf-stable items. But from this kind of most basic and, frankly, alien form of food, Native people all over the country came up with Frybread, this kind of alchemical transformation from just flour and water and salt, and made this delicacy, made this wonderful, nuanced thing that is a little bit different in every community, and that has endless variety and endless options. And we talked about the cultural significance of Frybread, not only as in terms of its history, but in terms of how it's eaten. So both Kayla and her mom said, you don't make Frybread unless you're feeding like 15, 20 people at least. But 15 and 20 people, that's not a lot. When you consider that you might live next to your grandma, next to your cousin, that you might just call everybody over and say, hey, we're making Frybread. Kayla was saying, like, you've usually got a big pot of chili on or something, or you call people and you say, hey, we're making barbecue. Come over and we're making Frybread too. Come get some. Which, take a second and imagine all the barbecue that's got to be better with Frybread. So there's that. And then there's also the cultural events. So like when there are dances, when there are ceremonies, the Sundberg family is among those providing food, cultural foods like acorn, eel, salmon, and things like that. There's always Frybread. And they might be cooking for 300 people, depending on the gathering, depending on the event. And even for a group of 20 people, you might make 100 pieces of Frybread. I guess that's maybe 25, because you need one for dinner. That's your first one. And then you might have another. And then there's dessert, which a food that can go from, dinner to dessert.
You also have to test it a few times just to make sure that it's coming out okay. So
then there are and the ugly ones that you have to eat while you're cooking, of course.
But it sounds a little like it might be comfort food. Would that fall into that?
It absolutely is. It absolutely is a comfort food. And they were talking about how without being able to gather with so many people, because we haven't been able to due to COVID, without being able to have ceremonies and dances, which we haven't been able to do because of COVID, people especially feel the importance of having that taste of eating that Frybread and feeling that connection like you do. When you have the food of the home you've been away from so long, and sometimes that home is other people, it feeds your soul. It is soul food, right? It is comfort food. It brings you back to your connection with your upbringing, your history, with pleasure, with all the wonders of family, and it tastes so good. But they're going to be opening up at the McKinleyville Farmers Market, and they're also going to be hopefully at the Arcata Farmers Market before too long. But right now they're at Sherry Heights Casino, and they have been there, I think, during the week from 6 p.m. on. But it's probably worth checking their Facebook page to double check when they'll be available. But,
get out there and get your Frybread is the.
Yeah.
And you know what, Jennifer, I feel ashamed that I doubted that you could do 12 minutes.
I mean, how much more time do we have?
I should have known.
I'll get some. We'll eat it. We'll do another hour.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you so much for that. That's going to just about do it this week. Get out there. The current edition of the North Coast Journal is on newsstands right now and online. Get it. Get entertained and continue to be informed. Jennifer and Thad, thank you so much. We'll see you again next week.
See you next week.